Miller Moss's performance from Saturday is drawing some scrutiny, but how much of that criticism is actually justified?
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 6th year covering U of L, 4th year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Don't forget to leave a comment in the YouTube section below, because as you all know, it's a great way to help the show continue to grow. It is much appreciated. We are taking another look at the Cardinals' offensive performance in the 40-17 victory over Bowling Green on Saturday, analyzing Miller Moss's performance. It's drawing some scrutiny, but how much of that criticism is actually justified? And I don't think all of it is justified at all. I actually thought he had a decent day at the office on Saturday. Still some stuff he needs to improve on heading into ACC play. We'll explain that here in just a moment. Offensive line play wasn't really all that great. Maybe an improvement from the James Madison game. We'll take a look at the PFF grades and discuss what needs to happen for this unit moving forward. And we'll also identify the 3 things that worried me the most. And you guessed it, also need to be improved upon going into the Pittsburgh game and beyond. But first, today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Okay, I'm going to admit this again, just because I feel like I need to, but I'm a little bit biased in this regard. I was a huge advocate for Louisville to bring in Miller Moss once he entered the portal at USC, once we found out that he was visiting the Cardinals. And even when he committed, I was, a huge advocate for the narrative that he was going to have the best quarterback season yet. Like, I predicted just weeks before the season that Miller Moss was going to record more passing touchdowns and passing yards than both Jack Plummer and Tyler Shough. Now, the way the first 3 games have gone, it doesn't seem like he's going to surpass Shough or Plummer. Now, that doesn't mean that he still can't be successful, but after a lackluster performance against James Madison, where he completed 13 of 23 passes for 151 yards and 1 touchdown and lost a fumble in that game. One of those touchdowns was a huge pass to Chris Bell, so the majority of that yardage on one chunk play. James Madison threw the kitchen sink at Miller, trying to get him off his game, and it was pretty much successful outside of a couple plays. A lot of focus on the Cardinals offense heading into the Bowling Green matchup, and yeah, JMU better than the Falcons, but still wanted to see how comfortable Miller Moss looked. Now, Isaac Brown had 1 carry due to injury. Duke Watson did not play. Chris Bell was not 100%, so Louisville made it an effort to throw the ball more, which they did, and Miller Moss was insanely efficient. 23 of 32, 316 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He got sacked 3 times. He got pressured, it seemed like exponentially more than that. But if you go to social media, and look, I understand that social media does not represent the majority of the fan base, but after the game, I was kind of appalled by the way the fan base reacted to Miller Moss's performance. I thought, I was sitting there like, wow, tough crowd. My gosh, you complete 72% of your passes, 316 yards, and you made it a point of emphasis in the second half to run the ball. When you got inside the red zone, that's what Jeff Brohm said in his post-game press conference. So maybe took a couple of the passing touchdowns away. Here's my takeaway that I'm trying to push. I thought Miller Moss wasn't bad on Saturday. Was he great? No. Was he bad? No. Was he terrible like some of the fan base insinuating? Absolutely not. Thought Miller Moss had a respectable day. Did what he needed to do to get Louisville a victory. Not to mention the offensive line play. He's still having to take a snap and get the ball out quickly, because chances are if he is dropping back on a regular, snap, he's getting pressured. Like, this Louisville offensive line is still struggling to protect Miller Moss. Also, Now, granted, I feel like this game they were better with the push up front, but still not a ton of gaps being created for this offensive line for the rushing attack. Now, granted, no Isaac Brown, no Duke Watson. Maybe it looks different. Maybe you try a little bit more outside zone. But still, Keywan Brown averaged 7 yards per carry, I think 84 yards on the ground with 2 short touchdowns. When you are forced to operate in a one-dimensional offense because you're not able to run the ball a ton, defenses can completely change their game plan because, I mean, they're not stacking, or if they're stacking the ball, if they're stacking the box, not stacking the ball, if they're stacking the box and making you throw and they're realizing that they're getting home by bringing pressure, it's going to make everyone's life difficult, especially the quarterback. So I think Miller Moss is sort of unfairly being blamed for the collective issues of this Louisville offense. The rushing attack not being able to get going, the offensive line not being able to protect, receivers dropping passes, and also the penalties. Like, all of this combines together. And let me be completely clear, everyone is to blame. Miller Moss has not been perfect. He also has not lived up to my expectations. Like, I thought Miller Moss was going to have a better start to the season than he has had now. Now, you look at the Pro Football Focus grades from the Saturday game, and yeah, I've been pretty vocal about PFF grades. I don't feel like they tell the whole tale until I started to understand PFF grades and what went into them. Basically, PFF grades are an analyst watching every single snap that a player plays, and regardless of the outcome of the play, they are basically gauging how much a player does their respective job. Overall, the offense had a 71.9 grade, and that grades out to being above average, barely. The passing was 66.3. That's average. Rushing was 84.1. So the improvement is right there with the offensive line, with Keywan Brown doing really well. The rushing attack improved. Miller Moss individually ranked sixth on the team with a 68.7% grade, which is pretty average. And that's kind of what I've been preaching, is that with the way that this fan base is criticizing, like, I don't disagree that he needs to improve, but I feel like it's almost been too critical and putting some of the blame on him that really shouldn't be directed at him. But again, the quarterback is going to take a lot of the criticism, just like they take a lot of the credit when things go right. It happens in football. It happens with star players in other sports. But I will say this, is that with this current version of Miller Moss that we've seen, I will agree. If Louisville has aspirations to contend in the ACC and compete for an ACC championship game bid, he has to improve. Like, this current version of Miller Moss, I don't believe would be able to lead Louisville to the promised land, so to speak. Now, what needs to be improved upon? I think it's going to be tough to gauge this from an offensive line perspective because that's out of his control. But I do think he needs better pocket awareness. There's some, feels like, coverage sacks that he plays his way into, holding on to the ball too long at times. I want to see him go through his reads and progressions a little bit quicker, whether or not that is, designing plays to get the ball out quickly. And I thought that we saw more of that against Bowling Green than we saw against JMU, but you have to continually see that, right? I also think he has to take what the defense gives him. There were times against Bowling Green, there were times against James Madison where, whether it was a check down, whether it was the opportunity to scramble and get more yardage, Miller Moss oftentimes has opted to try to thread the needle and fit the ball into a tight window or double coverage. Like, I look back to the first drive of the game where it's like second and short and Miller Moss is on a rollout. And it looks like for a brief moment, if he makes the decision, he's got the check down, which would have been a first down. It also looked like there was an angle that he could have scrambled and also got the first down. But instead, he's rolling to his right, throws to another player who's scrambling off to the right. And he's got a guy literally step for step, stride for stride, going with the receiver. And I forget who the receiver was. But it was an incomplete pass. And that's just sort of a highlight of how Miller Moss can improve. And this isn't an indication that I believe that Miller Moss isn't the guy. because I think that you can tweak things a little bit to where his effectiveness shoots through the roof. Better pocket awareness. Going through your reads and progressions quicker because you're not going to have that much time when you play better ACC fronts or when you play fronts that are better because they're Power 4 athletes. Take what the defense gives you. Move the ball down the field. Even if you have to be more of a surgeon than a quarterback that just hits the home run plays, like if you're moving down the field and extending drives and moving the chains and just increasing that effectiveness, you're going to score points. And that might be how Louisville has to attack moving forward if the offense isn't, or if the offensive line's not going to give him enough time to go through his reads. But also I think that Moss needs to do a better job of just standing in the pocket and delivering good throws. There are times where I feel like he tries to scramble too early. Now, granted, can you blame him that much because the offensive line has struggled here and there a good amount. Let's take a look at the offensive line. Offensive line didn't have a great performance on Saturday. The PFF grades are #not good. I felt like maybe it was an improvement, especially opening up holes for the rushing attack. But other than that, we're going to need to see some significant improvement ahead of Saturday. We'll discuss when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, you would be absolutely surprised to hear how many neighborhood businesses run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local bars that are packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And I am a firm believer that spending money in your community doesn't just support the business, it supports the people behind it. Those local spots are what makes the neighborhood feel like home, and so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. With it being football season, Card Nation, if you are like me and you go to a lot of home games, I'm going to let you in on a little secret because Game Time has completely changed the way that I get tickets. Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time on Saturday morning, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals, and I was able to get into the Louisville Bowling Green game at a cheaper price than any other service out there. I saw my tickets from a panoramic view on the app, and I got the Game Time guarantee, right, which takes away all the stress and gives me peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. One thing else that I want to make sure that I highlight as a key takeaway. We talked about how Miller Moss had a decent performance, but does need to improve moving forward. I think that there isn't just one thing that is plaguing this team offensively. I think there are a couple issues, a couple factors. I think that, the blame is shared across the board, right? You go from offensive line play to situational play calling to penalties to some quarterback mistakes, to a lack of a rushing attack, drops by receivers, not really being able to create a ton of separation. Like, there are so many factors that are at play here, and there's no right. I wasn't going to say there's no right or wrong answer. There's no one answer. Like, there's no one thing you can point to and say, you fix this, everything's going to magically be okay. Because that's not the truth. It's going to take a couple things improving. And one of those things is offensive line play. Now, I just read to you the PFF grade in the rushing attack. The Cardinals rushing attack had an 84.1 grade. 84.1 is pretty solid. It's good. I would argue that it's really good. Keywan Brown had a really good game against Bowling Green. He had 12 carries for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not having Isaac Brown or Duke Watson makes that PFF grade even more impressive. As much criticism as this offensive line gets, I do think it is necessary and fair to give credit where credit is due. Judging based upon the first 2 games against EKU and JMU, this was the best performance from an offense that is, the best performance for an offensive line that is setting up the run. You saw some holes in the second half, and there's something that Louisville tweaked in terms of play calling that might have just helped adjust and helped the offense become more efficient and effective. And we will mention that in the final segment. Jeff Brohm alluded to it in the post-game press conference. But from a pass pro standpoint, the Cardinals' offensive line wasn't really all that great. They gave up 3 sacks. There were more quarterback pressures. Overall, the Bowling Green defense had 6 tackles for loss. Now, this was a BGSU defense that has really good linebacker play. Front 7 has some players up front, but this was still a defense that your offensive line should have handled business against. And they lost a good amount of reps. Just getting beat 1v1. I thought the left side of the offensive line struggled on Saturday. And I did make a little bit of a mistake on yesterday's show. I made a point that Trevante Sylvester did not play in this game and make his season debut. I was incorrect, and I realized that right after because he did play sparingly. He logged 14 snaps in this game, and he ended up with a 58.8 PFF grade, which is not good. Now, shaking off the rust, I have faith that Sylvester, when he he was able to shake that rust off and get his feet back under him and get some more reps in and just be able to work through whatever that injury was. It was an undisclosed injury, post-injury, being able to play his first action of the season. The Cardinals need him to step up. And I think that he's going to. He was really good at left tackle last year. He was one of the reasons that Louisville's offensive line was able to steady the ship. And Richard Owens does a great job as an offensive line coach, but with portal recruiting, things kind of get challenging when it comes to scouting, when it comes to building the camaraderie and chemistry on the offensive line. It's kind of playing a dangerous game. And this year, things haven't necessarily gone the way that Louisville would like. Now, Louisville does need the offensive line to step up, especially in pass pro. 66.3 passing grade for the Cardinals offense, not great. Run blocking, and this is another thing. Like, yes, the rushing attack was better, but PFF seems to think that it was more so in spite of the offensive line play and not supported by offensive line play. 56.4 run blocking grade, 51.5 pass blocking grade. So a lot of this was Keywan Brown being able to make stuff happen when he absorbs the contact. Isaac Brown with a 1 carry for 18 yards. Let's look at some individual grades. Overall, 36 different players logged at least 1 snap for the Cardinals. The highest graded offensive lineman was Pete Nigra. He was the 7th ranked offensive player. He had a 68.6 grade. Not good. I wouldn't say bad either, but Lance Robinson, 65.7, Jordan Church, 63.2, kind of, reaffirms that notion that the right side was a little bit better than the left side in this game. Mohamed Musa, 60.8 grade. Nair Jackson, 59.7. Trevante Sylvester, 58.8. Mac Pounders, 58.1. Sam Seacrest, 54.7. Michael Flores, 54.3. Rasheed Miller, 54.1. Vic Cutler, 50.8. So, again, I don't think PFF grades tell like an entire story, but it just kind of confirms what you saw on the field. And although I think the run blocking might have been a little bit better than that 56.4 grade, I think the run blocking was the best that we've seen all season so far, which I know it's not necessarily a high bar, but I think that this unit can improve. Now, how much can they improve? That is the question. Still to be seen. But the Cardinals' offensive line has to improve. I think that with Sylvester coming back, it's going to. I think that with Kariski being able to be an inline blocker in the running game is going to help. But it's really just going to come down to the Cardinals making things happen. Now, is it going to be something to where you see more up-tempo for Louisville? Is it going to be something that more short yardage, quick reads, just kind of dinking and dunking down the field, being surgical, but still efficient and effective? Is it going to be more outside zone and trying to get your running backs the ball out in space? This is where Jeff Brohm is going to have to sit down with Richard Owens and the rest of the offensive staff and say, hey, look, guys, I mean, we got to figure something out. And I don't want to just be unfair to the offensive line, but through 3 games, the O-line play has not been great. And I think that you've got some players on this team that can help steady the ship, but kind of have to do some soul searching, kind of have to just be able to be effective and be serviceable at the very least. But let's take a look at 3 things that I was a little bit concerned about in this game. And again, things that have to be improved upon as we get into ACC play. We'll discuss. You're tuned in right here, Locked On Louisville. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. I mentioned this yesterday, and I'll mention it again, Card Nation. Kind of like last week, my schedule is really hectic. We'll be traveling with work. There will only be 4 episodes this week. We had yesterday's show. We have today's. We won't have one tomorrow. We will pick up on Thursday and Friday with as much Pittsburgh prep as we can. And I think that's going to be ample amount of preview and preparation. But today's show is all about discussing what the Cardinals didn't really do all that well and things that they need to improve upon. And look, I understand it might sound like a broken record, might sound very critical. Louisville did win 40-17. Yesterday's show, we gave them credit where credit was due. We celebrated a victory. But as a measure of respect, I think we can agree that we expect more from this team. There are high expectations. And if this team can improve some of these things, this team could be really dangerous to play. 3 things that I saw that concerned me a little bit. Once again, Louisville started out with a slow start. They ended up leading 7-3 at the end of the first quarter, but their first offensive possession after forcing a 3-and-out was their own 3-and-out, and that's after getting a 9-yard pass on first down to Jaleel Skinner. Second down was that incomplete pass to Chris Hughes was the intended target. Remember how I said Miller Moss, it seemed like he could have scrambled or hit his check down, but instead he threw into coverage and an incomplete pass. And then Kewan Brown got stuffed for no gain in a run out of the shotgun. Now, they ended up having to punt. Bowling Green then punted on their next drive. Louisville muffed the punt. Colin Lacey fumbled inside of Louisville territory. They bent but didn't break defensively and held their own, only allowed a field goal. Now, they did score a touchdown on that next drive, but this is the second game in a row where Louisville has started out slow. Now, they picked it up a little bit sooner than they did against JMU, but you aren't always going to get the opportunity to start slow and be able to bounce back against better competition. And the ACC, and this kind of goes back to 2023, one thing that the Cardinals did really well for the vast majority of that season was dominate the first quarter. And looking ahead to seeing how this team can improve, if Louisville starts out better offensively, if, that first drive script is more effective, maybe that changes the tone of this game. Maybe that gives the team more confidence and you're able to build off that. Now, thankfully, the defense has looked really good to start games, but again, have to be effective on both sides. So the slow start was something that I'm glad Louisville was able to overcome. Won't always have that opportunity. So I'd like to see the Cardinals be more effective early on. I think something that also goes into play there is the situational play calling. And Rashawn Myers of Big X Sports Radio, the radio station that I host Mondays with Dalton Pence on, he hosts Wake Up 502 on Saturdays. This was a great question from Rashawn. Rashawn asked Coach Brohm in the postgame press conference if switching to running out of the power formation versus out of the shotgun was something that was more so a tactical decision because they saw, of course I'm paraphrasing here, right? He basically asked, why did you do that? And kind of brought up that, showed more success. And Jeff Brohm agreed. Jeff Brohm was like, yeah, he's like, that's a good point. When operating out of the power formation, getting Keywan Brown the ball downhill, gaining some speed as he gets the ball at the line of scrimmage, he was able to make more things happen. And I think that the offensive line also benefited when the Cardinals switched to that type of play calling versus handing the ball off in the shotgun and giving more opportunities to the defense for a tackle for loss. Now, I feel like the situational play calling is pertaining to short yardage situations. 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, it seems like at times either Louisville tries to get too cute and too fancy, or they kind of telegraph what they're going to do. And of course, if you get it, the coaching staff gets praise. If you don't, it's on the coaching staff. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation there. But I feel like it's something that does need to be cleaned up because it was an issue at times last year. And I like that the Cardinals made the adjustment to operate not out of the I formation, but out of that power formation with Moss under center, and being able to get an idea of which gap you want to run through. So liked that we saw an improvement in the second half, but still a ton of touchdown drives or a ton of drives. Couple of drives, sorry, not a ton of drives. Let me rephrase because a ton is a phrase that I'm using probably too much. There were a couple of drives, especially in that third quarter, where they stalled out inside of Bowling Green's territory because they weren't able to get things done on 3rd down. Now, Louisville has been one of the better 3rd down conversion teams in the country this year, so hopefully in those short yardage situations, the Cardinals are able to become more efficient. Now, the third thing, and this might be the most worrisome, most concerning. Penalties gotta stop. They have to decrease significantly. Now, Louisville had 6 penalties for 55 yards in this game, but a couple of these penalties took away some big-time gains. Like at the moment, the Cardinals are 123rd in the country out of 132 eligible teams, 123 out of 132, averaging 8.5 penalties per game. They're 121st out of 132 teams in 77.5 penalty yards per game. 2 things that have to drastically decrease starting this weekend, going into ACC play, because it's really hurting this team. Some things are happening offensive line-wise. Holding calls have hurt this team. I don't know the splits on offense penalties versus defensive penalties, but I would imagine it's somewhat similar, probably even, maybe more so on the offensive end, or on the offensive side. But man, I feel like if Louisville is going to maximize this offense, they have to stop making life more difficult for themselves. situational play calling, eliminating slow starts, and not to mention limiting penalties. Now, to be completely clear, I'm not throwing in the towel in late September. I think that is way too early. Like, I still have a belief that this team can be good and be really good and contend in the ACC. But it starts this week with starting to improve. I'm not saying that everything has to be improved upon because I know that that's not realistic. But Louisville has to show substantial improvement in multiple different aspects. When we come back, it's going to be all about Pittsburgh prep on Thursday, looking into that game. Louisville currently a 6.5-point favorite according to FanDuel. That is going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you back here on Thursday. Go Cards.